Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the LJLOU, bringing you the LJL Spring 2021 coverage. Must one. This week. Initialize. Nightmare on the other side. Woo! Man, my keyboard's gone a little bit wild, but that's okay. I'm fine still, regardless. My headphones pulled me back to reality. Gentlemen, our next game up, our second game of the day is going to be Crest Gaming Act facing off against Sengoku Gaming, and Sengoku have definitely looked dangerous over the coming weeks. They have been progressively getting better and better as the days and the games go on. Super Week was a very defining moment for this team, and Crest Gaming Act are now coming off of a comeback win, to say the least. Gentlemen, what's your thoughts about each of these teams? I'll go to you, Nightmare, first.
So obviously we just talked about CJ quite heavily in that last game. There are two ways we can view that last game. One is that
Mm,
Axis threw away that game. On the other side, CGA decisively took the opportunity that would get them back into that game. We saw that kind of playstyle fail against particularly V3 in Super Week, where honestly they should have won. Okay, That
yeah.
that game should have been done. It should
Yes.
have been put to bed. That is no longer, of course, the case. That is not what happened. They ended up losing that game. It worked against Axis. Question is that playstyle going to be decisive and consistent enough to take down a team like Sengoku, who are decidedly looking stronger than Axis?
Initially, what's your thoughts on where Nightmare is coming from? I think there's some value there.
I think there's some value to both points of view, right? Because Axis had a very good lead off very good plays early on, and CJ kind of let it happen a little bit, particularly in that bot lane where it all fell apart, particularly around then, and even then, some of the plays around, say, initial Herald as well, where things kind of got a little bit dicey on the engage. All of that stuff, you go, yeah, that's not great from CGA, but I think credit does have to be given about managing to stay close enough that they could find the turnaround fights, and also being calm and collected in a difficult situation. We saw that yesterday from, say, to an extent, DFM, who were down a little bit of some kills yesterday in the later games, but they said, well, we've still got Nephelios, still got Nazir, still got a Graves. These guys scale super hard. Okay, let's play it safe. Let's see what we can pick off and get us back into that game. And smart macro plays like taking the Baron give me some hope for CGA.
Yeah, Crest Gaming definitely found the opportunities in the game, which maybe was Axis giving Crest Gaming Act opportunistic mindset maybe coming in, a bit of both. Maybe against some other teams they might have not had that opportunity, and I don't think Sengoku will give them that opportunity, Nightmare.
No, I think that Sengoku in the last couple of weeks, well, notably Super Week, right? They
Yeah.
showcased a different style of play for themselves, not just crush through bot lane, have Gango pop off. They started playing around Paz, playing a winning side lane matchup, playing the Camille. And Paz is not necessarily the carry player from the top side. What he does know, though, is how to play safely across macro states, so understanding that, okay, I win this side lane, I can push up. Or if he is in danger, he tends to not be the person getting picked off. Sengoku kind of ground out a couple of wins just using this style, saying, look, we have a winning side lane, we just have to be stable elsewhere, and we will eventually get to that win. Now, that is the kind of play which CGA can't necessarily counter with these huge, quick and fast punches at these objectives. Although, of course, Sengoku did kind of lose to the team fighting prowess of a team like DFM. That's kind of the story of a lot of teams that come against DFM. The question is, can CGA channel any of their upper skill ceiling and see if they could do the same to Sengoku?
Yeah, Sengoku Way Gaming were able to go 3-1, only falling to Detonation Focus Me, as you said, but that was also the roster of Detonation Focus Me that we've been seeing for most of the split, not the switch up that we have been seeing Detonation Focus Me do against some of these higher level teams. For whatever reason, they really wanted to keep Arya around for this one. Maybe it's just hinting towards their expectations on who they think they'll be facing later, and they wanted that tryout against Rascal Jester and V3 Esports. We'll have to wait and see how playoffs actually go and where all these teams end up during playoffs. Initialize, what are your thoughts on Sengoku Gaming coming into this match?
They are on the rise, I think it's fair to say. They're
Yeah.
not flawless, but we have begun to see what makes this team really strong. We've seen some flexibility, as we said, some ability to play through Paz rather than just through Gango and NT. Get
Mm.
Ramone connected to the team because for a while he looked a little bit disconnected, particularly from Crash and what was going on with his squad. So they are starting to come together as a cohesive unit, and we've known these guys have got very talented mechanical players. NT and Gango have been a great laning pair. Crash is starting to come online, and Paz and Ramane are pulling their weight. That is good news, and the synergy is coming online at the right time. They can still sometimes see some disconnect moments, particularly around what, say, jungle plus X lane is doing. And sometimes you can catch them just being a little overeager to push for turrets, but they're coming online at the right time. They're coming online with some interesting drafts. Hell, if you're feeling confident enough to go teleport Ignite into Ebby in the top side, you're feeling okay as a team.
I must be feeling something. We'll have to wait and see how Sengoku do end up doing in some of their later matches. Obviously, they have got a huge match coming. Well, actually, no. They have. Yeah, no. I am right with saying that. They have got a huge match coming up today, and that's going to be Rascal Jester facing off against Sengoku Gaming. And while it's not our match of the day or match of the week, it's a bit of both. It's still a very important match, just kind of gauge where both these teams are standing. Obviously, Rascal Jester, as Nymera had already hinted towards our podcast, which yes, I agree with him. You should definitely go check out.
Great podcast.
Yeah, not biased at all.
No.
Rascal Jester might be the best team, so Sengoku can at least stand up to the fire that they can show. It's maybe some good stuff to see from them. However, gentlemen, we can hypothesize, we can predict, we can go everywhere and anywhere with this one. But I want to quickly get your 2-second thoughts on who do you think's winning this matchup of Sengoku Gaming facing off against Crest Gaming Act. Initialize, you first, sir.
I think on current form, it has to be Sengoku Gaming. That is the smart analysis in my eyes.
Okay, and Nymera, over to you.
I think, again, on paper, you look at the odds, it's probably like 70-30 to Sengoku, so I'm going to go with them.
All right, Sengoku Gaming, it is from the desk. Ladies and gentlemen, let's find out how this game actually turns out in the pick and ban phase. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mass Swan. It's great to have you back, restored with us, talking about these games. No more two-man cams on analyst desks. Who does that, I tell you? Right, we have got ourselves Sengoku Gaming on the blue side, CGA over on the red for the second time, of course, this day. But before we get to them, we've got to go through Sengoku's lineup, which is Paz, Crash, Ramane, Gango, and of course, NT.
On the other side, it's red and blue teams switched on the actual sides of the rift. The blues team logo is on the red side of the rift. That's CJ with Nap, Kassin, Nathan, Milan, and Alchemy.
That doesn't make things complicated, does it? We've got a few bans to go through, of course. That will be the Twisted Fate away from Nation. It's been a very high priority ban here in the LJL. We were talking about it yesterday, but it's only been picked a handful of times, but seen a lot of bans regardless. And on the other side, of course, Tristana and the Thresh off the table, looking towards Gango and NT's laning prowess, and I can't necessarily say I blame CJ for focusing down there.
Well, we saw this a little bit from CJ in previous weeks, where we saw them give up stuff like Kai'Sa or other AD carry picks because they thought, actually, Tristana just threatens us too much in the laning phase, and Gango and NT as a duo are a threatening laning duo. Giving Crash Udyr is a bold call from CGA, given the fact that they smashed Cog on V3 with this pick in their game versus them. Now the question is, of course, do Sengoku lock in something like the Camille and just say, Leah, we're just going to permagank this top lane? And what would CGA do to respond to that?
Well, this is the Udyr, as we mentioned. It's so powerful. It kind of also forces you to think about how do we disengage Udyr. I've been talking around some of the my coaching friends that I know have been about the scene, and they've kind of had this conversation which says basically the problem with Udyr is so many champions which you would normally draft to disengage use their ultimates to disengage, and effectively if all Udyr has had to do is have Chem Tank active and running at you, and you're forced to say use a Gragas ultimate to disengage him, then that is a win for Udyr. He's barely had to burn anything, and he's got a big ticket ultimate at you for just being a fast. Like, yeah, you've got to think really carefully about it.
Yeah, it's the economics of ultimates and summoners, right? If you have to flash, if you have to wall, things don't go great in terms of the micro trades, which can lead to bigger advantages. The same could be said for the likes of when Sejuani was in meta. Sejuani can only really fight when she has ult, for instance, right? Now we look at the Senna, we look at the Tahm Kench. These are two champions which are very happy to fight ult or no ult. Having Gango on this pick is this is again the showcase of the new style which Sengoku have been playing. They've been playing more towards safe bot lanes which scale up, which is not something which we would have put towards Gango in the last year. Often was Gango had to get ahead, or they would play very poorly on the weak side of the map. Not been the case for this roster, though, on a different team of Sengoku.
Of course, this will be the second game for Gango's Senna this split. First game was excellent, second, and we'll have to see how this second game, of course, works out. Largely did some pretty good numbers on it the last time, well over that 25% damage share, good DPM. Might be a weak side player, but Gango is still putting up good numbers on the champion regardless. Of course, that last pick there from CGA. Lilia will be the pick from Cassin. Of course, Lilia, with all the jungle nerfs that have been coming through in recent patches, has kind of risen to preeminence in the jungle. I know Kobe over in the LTS really rates Lilia right now, and can honestly see why. So much damage, such quick farm speeds. Lilting Lullaby is so potent. It's a big AP threat. Just a lot going for the champion.
And it has that throwaway engage in the same way that if Udyr is running at you and forces things out for free, you can sometimes force things out for free with just a swirl seed, right? Because the threat that comes through from that champion. Of course, most of the time the threat comes through from actually the ultimate being popped, and you can deal with that by having the Tom Kench devour up. It feels like it's ultimate sometimes. And other things like that. We have to take a step back and remember that this is Gango versus old team. This is Gango versus... He was on the CJ roster of 2020. He was one of the main carries for that roster alongside Arya, who's now moved over to Dead Nation Focus Me. This is a big match. Much like we were saying, Paz versus V3, that was kind of... Maybe not a grudge match because, there's a little more good vibes than bad between most of these teams. It's still a rivalry to take into account.
Yeah, that's really true. It definitely is. And of course, Gango here with the pick he's got can definitely do a lot of carrying, but it's not necessarily the same playmaking strong side champion that would be that opportunity to flex on your team in the same way. But I mean, it's a Senna. She's been pretty damn strong. Just ask the likes of Reckless or Sven. You can see what those guys can do. That second phase of bans, we kind of were talking about other things, but worth pointing out that Milan did have his champion pool first, whereas CGA went towards things like the Camille away from Paz, and it's left Milan to go towards this Xayah as his pick in the bot side. And then Sengoku have gone with a Gnar and a Victor. Both pretty strong, both pretty great into a number of matchups. Relatively hard to counterpick as it stands.
So, we saw Wukong last game from Inno on the side of Axes. The original Wukong, the best Wukong in the LJL of last year, was Nap. Nap locks in that champion, and, well, CGA, if they don't play towards... if they didn't play towards topside in that last game so much, they certainly can do this game. This champion, this player, it's a good combination.
Nathan very nearly, as we said, took down Detonation Focus Me. He honestly styled for large portions of that first game versus them. Pulled out some amazing little sequences. Got the solo kill versus Arya. Manages to get Kazu and Mutapon, largely of Kazu kind of inting away and jumping down to left. Poor old Utapon tanker culling, much to his AD carry's displeasure. But the point being, this guy knows what he's doing on the champion. He's very proactive on it. And CGA, as we said, have always been a team this split who ride or die by how well their mid laner is doing. Cassin's in on that one too, but if Nation is carrying, CGA are doing well.
That's often been the litmus test. Much like for Axes, we say it's Hoglet and Honey. For CJ, it is more often than not Nation, because that relieves pressure on players like Milan to actually get to items to play in the late game. I think Milan's Xayah has been their best champion so far, and that's a good sign too. Question is, of course, what can Milan and Alchemy do in the laning phase versus Gango and NT, because this is not really an interactive laning phase. I would imagine that Gango is going to come out to... well, not CS leads, because this is most likely going to be a fasting center in the farm Kench. So it will be a question of course, what can Nahon and Kassin do? Kassin on another mage jungler. It's not the Karthus this time. In Super Week, they played 2 games of that Karthus-Lucian combo to success, and then to also very demoralizing failure versus V3 as well. And Nation, even in that game versus V3, so close to taking over that game at multiple different points. Have to see if he can do it this time, though, because he will once again be into one of those Gnar picks, which can deal with Lucian in team fights. If you dash in, you Gale Force in, you can just get slammed into that wall and your team fight's over.
Yeah, and I've kind of also got to call out here as well, they've gone for Sengoku have gone for this Senna, Tom, Kench duo on the bot side, which is largely speaking, relatively weak side. You want Senna to kind of get to a certain soul mark rather than an item mark before she becomes a damage or true damage hyper carry threat rather than just a sort of utility AD carry. And of course, that probably means that Crash is going to be looking elsewhere. And Gnar and Victor aren't necessarily the best lanes to play through. I mean, you've definitely got options with Gnar if you can get Mega Gnar for the combos with all the sort of CC you can chain together, but Wukong is a relatively slippery champion, and I'm kind of interested to see what Crash decides to do with his early game, because I'm not necessarily sure he has the easiest targets or the easiest setups in his lanes to work with on that top side of the map.
No, again, you're probably going to head towards that Gnar lane. That's what you want to set
Probably.
behind that Wukong. Wukong playing from behind is not very fun to play, almost unplayable in a lot of the situations. So I think that's probably the highest value gank you have, because you're not really going to be locking down
Sure.
anything in that mid lane. As the Udyr is not a great mid lane ganking champion on the bot side. You know, there's the Senna Tahm Kench duo, which is very non-interactive. Sure, you can start throwing out W's to set up for yourself. On the other side, of course, you'll have you'll have CJ looking at that lane and being like, okay, well, we don't exactly get to break that open. So for me, it's more about what's happening with the first objective fights. How is it going to be around the first Herald, first Dragon? And that is so often how the LJL, or at least the LJL, tends to fight around second and third dragons pretty heavily. Third one's where, if no fights happen in the game, third dragon is where things start popping off. We don't really see as many snooze fests as we did do sometimes as in spring 2020. Looking at you, Sengoku V3. That was an awful matchup. 57 minutes of pure pain. And,
It goes down in infamy.
That it has. But I mean, the thing about CJ is that because they have had such an emphasis on playing aggressive early games, or even if they've outplayed themselves, heck, like last game, right? They kind of outplayed themselves, got outplayed, and they had to claw things back. At least there was some action in it, and they're not just content to sit there and not interact. They tend to decide whether they win or lose their own games, if you get what I mean. The heroics and tragedy of CGA. Make a play out of it. Sure, it'll be great.
Look, got a bit of a title scroll going on here. Nice yellow text going up the front of your screens, or at least metaphorically here, because of course this, I actually feel at least early
LJL,
on,
episode 7. 6 weeks have passed since the start of the split.
yeah, episode 7, and this one I think, well, rather would be the rise of the farming junglers. We've got ourselves a Lilia versus a Nudia early on, with not that much to gank, and it's just going to be a bit of a farm wars for these guys, really, until they hit that point for those mid-game team fights, I suspect. That said, of course, you know, it is AD plus AP. You hit level 6, Lilting Lullaby into people jumping on an erstwhile Victor or a Gnar. Could be opportunities for Cassie, and of course, it's an Udyr. He can just flash bear slap, and, you know, that's pretty good CC for whoever you hit. So, you know, there's always a world where I'm proven wrong, but at least on paper, I'm not expecting crazy early ganks or real pressure lanes at the moment.
No, that's the thing, right? There's no real gankable lane. You don't have a Jace, which you always know is going to drag attention to it, or a Caitlyn on the other side. Those are the two champions I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, if they're in the game, you know that there will be pressure and look-ins towards those lanes. I mean, Wukong versus Gnar, we saw that at level 1. At levels, you can trade. I mean, if you are your Ebbies, your Naps of the world, you can look towards those level 1 E-trades on the Wukong versus Gnar, but it's not going to be anything which breaks up in the game. It's not going to be anything which is worth these junglers potentially putting themselves behind to, you know, find some micro advantage, if that, in these lanes. As we can see, actually, NT starts with the Devour. You can Devour buffs. Your leashes are really good now.
Yeah, that's actually really true. I hadn't even thought about that, but that's really true.
Yeah, I mean,
Really
it's not
good
like
leash.
Jungle Tom Kench is not coming back. It was barely even a thing. But
I think I'm quite glad about it. I remember that being a thing, and it was so annoying. Like, I was trying to play Kindred.
Remember Ebby getting the triple kill with the top lane Tom Kench?
Yeah.
That was a time.
I remember him playing out in the 1v1 tournaments versus the Shy. So, you know, that was alive. As Naken hits level 2 and starts dashing forwards. And this is actually a matchup I do want to touch on. I've got some stats for you now, Mara. So, Naken has had just incredible stats through this split. You know, he is second highest gold per minute behind
NT might have worse splits. Flash stun.
Okay. Maybe we won't have to talk about that, because indeed there is a flash stun in the bot side. And
okay, no. Tell me about Ramune Naken.
Okay, so we were going to talk about something in the early game, but instead Milan and Alchemy decided, screw this idea.
No. Tell me about this mid lane matchup. I'm a mid laner. I can deal with it.
We want to match up. So, okay, so Naken, genuinely very, very good. You know, CS per minute, he is 0.1 behind Arya as the second best CS in the league, second best GPM in the league, great damage percentage. He's up there as second highest damage percentage in the league behind Dasher. This guy has been hard carrying for this squad. And then I look over at Ramone, and he's got 7.8 CS per minute, which is not fantastic. He's tied with a number of mid laners, but that's effectively tied with Megamin, Ace, and Gadiadu, who've all had not necessarily known for that kind of farming, as Alchemy does go in again in that bot side and actually gets traded on relatively hard here. More aggressive in that bot side than I was perhaps necessarily expecting, and Crash and Cassin actually going to be fighting around this Scuttle Crab. We'll have to talk about mid laners a little later, but Crash does secure that Scuttle Crab, and Caskin will instead have to wander across that bot side river to secure his own.
No, but no, I mean, there is something to be said about, okay, go find your analysis and then go find the stats afterwards, so you're not getting kind of led astray by numbers which can be interpreted in multiple ways. But I think in this case, you're absolutely right in terms of looking at Neji and looking at Ramone and saying, yeah, there was a moment where Sengoku put Ramone onto Syndra, and yes, there was 1 win, 1 loss, but it looked like Ramone was finally having agency in a game, finally actually having some impact, because before that, it was just kind of holding the lane. He was just he was just making sure that he wasn't a liability, not necessarily being the main carry. He wasn't necessarily giving up all the kills and all the other stuff as well. Alchemy now on the mount down. Oh, mounting up.
Crash down. Enti's in trouble, but now the teleports start getting popped. Krasin trying to get out of here, trying to Blooming Blow and run away. Flashed over the wall. Now Crash caught out. Nobody dies. Teleports burned. Summoners burned. Everybody just about stays alive.
15 HP on Cassin. Really close run stuff. As we said, CGA, they are not normally content to let things sit non-interactively during the early game. This time it's them that starts the play, and Alchemy, who was taught by Gango and a number of AD carries to play the laning phase, that's what he said in his own interviews, comes out with a couple of big plays. Of course, it is actually going to be the farm advantage over to the Tahm Kench against the AD carry. It's not really what you want. I think Sengoku are getting more for their money's worth for what you'd expect in this matchup right now. But they have at least forced out a couple of summoners from that Sengoku bot lane.
There's a W pop for Man stepping forward. The crash down coming through as well. That's a big stun from the Attract Repel, and first blood goes the way of Milan and Alchemy. What was this about those guys not being in lane? They've done super well here, just been so aggressive. It was supposed to be a relatively non-interactive early game, and instead the aggression comes through. That's a big last embrace, and the teleport's coming through as well. Enti back into the game, because of course Tahm Kench runs that. But with Cassin around, there will not be any further aggression, and CGA find first blood in the 2v2. Milan and Alchemy making a statement down in this bot lane.
Yeah, so one thing to note about Rel versus this lane is that I think her W is on something like a 13-second cooldown. The Devour on Tahm Kench much more like 26 seconds, if I remember correctly. It's around that kind of timestamp, which means that if you are engaging on both your mount up and your crash down combos, you will always find engages when the Devour is down, and that means you can start looking for the double crash downs, looking for the flip over the shoulder on someone important. Now, actually, with this, Enti's walking up. They do catch Milan on one of those Qs, though, getting some extra poke damage down.
Crash and Cassin on the other side of the map, and Nation starts dashing forwards as well. That's the Chaos Storm out from Ramone, who does get it ticking away on Nation a few times there. And we're gonna take a little bit of a step back. Some low health bars around and about here as Enti as well. Definitely got enough of a HP advantage to maybe force Milan and Alchemy back. Finally, they will get that recall off, and we might finally get a bit of a breathe. The moment I start trying to set up some actions around mid lane, bot lane turns into a fiesta.
That does. Oh, this is actually something which I've not seen from Morale before. You can leash Scuttle super well because you Q break shields. Lilia doesn't get to have an immobilize on Scuttle. So particularly in this combo, Alchemy can save Cassin, a second to 2 seconds on actually clearing out that Scuttle, which means that potentially can be someone more important more quickly.
Particularly
today,
I learned a lot of APs through as well. That's quite a nice little touch. We like those interactions, and as it stands, gold is in favor of Sengoku Gaming right now, despite the first blood going the way of CG8. That's just off laning stats right now, particularly over and towards that top lane, and of course Crash as well, currently with a bit of a farm advantage. But it's not that much to write home about, but it is of course that 1,000 gold mark, which is always nice. Paz continuing to play pretty well in this 1v1, range versus melee, lots of plates going down towards the map.
This is also, the quote-unquote counter matchup that CJ wanted to play around. this is not the best laning phase that Nap would have aimed for. Nap has not necessarily been a laning specialist. Still got the XP, but losing 2 turret plates in an isolated 1v1 is really not what you want on that top side of the map. Led to an 800 gold lead for Paz, and again, Paz is not necessarily the carry of Sengoku. Mega Na being a bulwark to try and fend off the Lucian who's trying to dash into things, and as we said, Mega Na is such a good check onto Lucian who wants to start dashing in. It's important that he is ahead in this game.
Yeah, it is, and of course, Nap's kind of been left to play weak side because Milan now could be playing super aggressive down that bot side, all of that kind of jazz. It's a range versus melee matchup. All of these things make Wukong's life relatively difficult. He doesn't necessarily have the best kind of, I won't call it early laning phase, because of course levels 1 and 2 he's got some options, but you know, like, there's a point like around like level 5 where it's like, I kind of just want an item complete before I can really trade with you. And that makes things a little difficult. We'd love that Trinity Force at some time soon, but for now, Paz has taken his advantage and has tried to rotate it over towards this Rift Herald. Ramone roaming up. Looks like CGA not going to be the easiest place to contest. Still thinking about coming with a swell, so won't happen, but now Nap roaming down, might look for the engage. That's the flash. Ooh. Cyclone. Who needs a laning phase when you can do this? Ramone have forced to flash away. Second charge of the Cyclone comes out, but nothing much more comes. It's a flash for a flash, Ramone for Nap, and the Herald does go the way of CGA despite them attempting to find the engage.
I mean, I think I take the flash away from your Wukong, trading it onto Ramone.
No chance to talk about that. Every time we go for some analysis, more stuff comes out, and it is a 1-for-1. AD carry gets one kill, AD carry gets the other. Dawning Shadow gets one. Milan now has to try and get his way out as the auto start coming through. Finally forces the Feather Storm out of Milan. He doesn't have much mana, and that will be an unfortunate time in that at least Gango gets to shove the wave into tower, which will deny it from Milan even if the kills are even.
That was very close to it being actually a 2-for-1. That heal on Milan, you see it's up right now. It was about 2 seconds up. 2 seconds away from being up during that fight. In fact, actually, I think it was probably still down for about a second after he came down from the Feather Storm. I was wondering if there was going to be a flash forward for a final auto from Gango. A little too risky, though, for the Sand to go forwards. Does trade into 1-for-1. It's ults traded, summoners blown, and a 1-for-1 on that bot side.
All the while, of course, Crash summoned that Rift Herald on top side to get Paz all those turret plates and first turret. And of course, you have to remember as well that Cassin showed bot to help Milan shove out, which meant the Herald got the second charge. So that was a nice trade. It's pushed Sengoku's gold lead significantly further. But of course, CGA with Cassin on that bot side trade back by getting a dragon. But it's still probably an advantage to Sengoku because where the wave ended up and the pressure disadvantage around there, at least right now, that gold lead probably means more than the first dragon that's only the Ocean Drake right now.
So, I mean, I'm looking through a couple of the early game stats in terms of first objects and stuff. So, my inkling would be, okay, CJ, they don't really have strong laning phase on the bot side, and this game has been a pleasant departure from that from CGA. But they actually do get themselves the majority of their first dragons, 64%. Sengoku have higher than that still, but I would have thought that CGA would maybe be indexing more into their first herald, more into their, and that allows them to get more first towers. Well, I mean, they're also, not really, they haven't had the most successful split. They've only had their first tower in about 30% of the games, only even slightly below that. I think that has shown towards their early game woes in terms of them just not firing on all cylinders, even when they have been picking towards their early game jungle champion pool from the likes of Kassin. And speaking of that,
just been I think I would say we're going to see like that engage come on towards that Raptor camp there as Crash steals that away. Will force them out away from taking those control wards. Well, 2 of them in the jungle, very deep there. CJ just can't come and clear, leaving this Wukong still on a bit of an isolated island, and it's becoming even darker. The seas between top and everywhere else, that's red side ocean. Just a little bit awkward to get through. Poor old Nap in this top lane. And I guess I was about to say, like, yeah, CGA really prioritized that dragon. And I think often in trade for first turret, I feel. They've gone towards the dragon, and everybody else has gone, well, we'll take first turret in trade. It's been an attempt at this bot side, but Cassin is on vision, and that's just mean the Crash turns up, and turret number 2 on that island in top lane, sinking pretty fast up there.
This is exactly what we saw from Outer Super Week Sengoku, and I've got the ultimate traded onto Ramone. Hitting the W from Lucian first just means that you get the extra movement speed when you're firing through on the Culling, gives you the move speed to just kind of sidestep a little quicker, keep up with the dancing shoes of your opponent. Of course, what you really want is to get that press attack to get the extra 10% damage from the press attack exposure debuff, which means that you do just get so much damage out of a Culling, which is one of the higher base damage abilities in the game. Nathan not really getting much value out of that now. And Crash will contest for this Raptor camp. Of course, he stole the last one away, and he will take that as well. Has himself a sizable farm lead over that jungle too. Actually, that's where a lot of this farm lead will be, the gold lead rather, will be on Sengoku. As you can see, Victor's now got himself up to his Death Ray upgrade 2. So now there's a lot of wave clear and winning sidelines for be business as usual for this team in terms of their recent playstyle.
Just checking over to see whether there's much in the way of item completions. Nothing much, but just part components there. There's the word I am looking for. Milan, of course, 2-0. Got himself an Essence Reaver first, so that's not a component. He's doing pretty well for CGA. Has had honestly, a fairly good, strong game here. Of course, has dropped a little bit of that CS towards the Tom Kench, partly because, as we said, there was that awkward trade where Milan did get the kill, but was forced away from the wave and away in a bit of a difficult spot. So that hurt there, but still got the kills, feeling pretty strong. Got the Cullen inventory as well, so that's definitely a win condition for CGA. And, you know, they do have some big teamfight wombo combo between Aurel, a Wukong, and a Lilia setting up for double AD carry to shred the team fight for them. But at this point, Sengoku as well have got the gold lead, have got this Gnar up to his first item, got those 2 turrets in top lane, and if they can split the map and play a 1-3-1 with a Victor and a Gnar shoving in the side lanes, then they've definitely got the right people ahead to try and play for that style.
They do. So what are we waiting for next? Well, first dragon's down. We said, okay, second, third dragon, that's often where we see the first big fights of the game. Well, that means that we could see our first big fight in either half a minute when Herald spawns, or of course, when we have that dragon spawning in a minute itself. Mythics are coming through. Often what you will see a lot of these teams in the LJL do is waiting until their team composition is kind of fully realized, if you get what I mean. In terms of, okay, we can actually perform the primary role of this champion with its mythic item. You don't really like performing that beforehand. I actually think that will not stand this region particularly in good stead when it comes to international performances. When we look at the likes of the LJL, the LPL, the PCS, the VCS, which play more aggressively earlier into the game, or heck, even versus your Cloud9s and G2s of the world, which of course will likely be attending that event, or teams that can beat them playing that style. So having Sengoku and CGA waiting for this amount of time doesn't necessarily bode well for that. However, they're also very effective when they do reach those fights uncontested, and we are yet to see that first big fight, as we were saying, materialize onto the Rift.
Paz doing so well. We saw in that gold graph right there. Massively head versus lane opponent. Big chunk out there onto Milan as well, just as this second dragon's about to spawn. And goes hit 60 miss. Sniped in early as well, so lots of things going the way of Sengoku right now. Milan has managed to heal up, and CJ still stops the dragon. I want to see whether the teleports come through. Paz is close to Meganos. This could be a fight. There is the teleport, and this will be the start of one of those big fights. Nap channels just straight after. Dragon is gone down. That is second for CJ. But Cassin caught out in the pit a little, gets stunned in place. The tongues come through from Tom Kench, and flash out from Cassin keeps him alive. Paz getting cold on the backside. He's getting just run down. He went for the teleport flank and just dies in a 1v1. Tom Kench gets well at the back end of it. But Nap finds a huge cyclone and is surviving. What is this? At least it gets traded back, but that was not what they wanted. It is a 2-for-2.
Oof.
And CGA get the dragon, despite Sengoku feeling like they had the opportunity.
See, the CGA win themselves that fight so hard. Actually, no, it was a pretty even fight. Either way, the extra casualty of that is unfortunately my play-by-play's voice at the end of it. Milan doesn't have to use the ultimate. That's important. Maybe it would have been... See, this is awkward, right? Because you see that the Wukong wants to get into the back line, whereas actually Milan would prefer the front-to-back kind of team fight. The question is, what do the rest of the champions want? Because actually trying to do that versus a Victor and a Senna, pretty difficult. Because Sin is kind of left on an island, but they don't really manage to close them down. In fact, actually, while they're looking for it, Alchemy sees the engage to get on top of Gango. Devour's used early into the fight, and Nap says, all right, okay, Devour's down. I mean, that's kind of my job done. They can also similarly start skirmishing around. The thing about the Wukong and, of course, the Lucian is that they do just prefer having this skirmishy kind of style. The fight breaks up. Even though Xayah prefers to play the same style that Senna and Victor do on the side of Sengoku, the solo lanes of TGA come up pretty large in that fight.
Was about to offer some praise, some statistical praise for Paz, and it feels like every time I've started to talk about stats, something crazy has happened that's prevented it from happening, or maybe eat my words a little bit there. I say Paz has had a stellar game in terms of, or stellar split in terms of his ability to pick up CS and gold in a game.
Also
And
on top
I
side.
speak about it again. He's getting ganked and put under the turret here. Cassin and Nap stepping forward. He's got Strikebreaker trying to flash away. Still gets jumped on. There's the Cyclone. Cassin has got Lilting Lullaby. Does miss the Swell. Cedo's nearly at Mega. This could be the turnaround. There he comes. Gets the wallop that's buffered well. And wait for the watch out. Eep, there it is. Meganar into the wall, and Paz is winning in this 1v2. Does get shut down, but gets the 1v1. And I was about to, oh no, Paz, I was about to curse you with stats. And instead, he earns a 1v3 kill. Well done, Paz.
1v3 after sidestepping 2 Swirl Seeds and then stunning out Kassin when he looks for the Watch Out Eve to finally get that Dream Dust passive. Crash gonna kill the turret. Oh, actually, he doesn't. Well, he does. Okay, fight builds up again.
Nathan having to try and get out. He's got the flash, but he's getting chased down by a Chaos Storm. Crash gets that kill. And or rather, Ramane gets the double there in the mid lane. And the other person for Sengoku, who has had the lowest kill participation of any mid lane who started more than 3 damn games, has found himself a couple great kills in that mid lane. And Sengoku finding advantages now across the board. They are up 5,000 gold.
CJ overforced a little on the top side, and that shows their hand, which means that Sengoku say, all right, you overforced, you used too many tools for that fight. We will use our own subsequent summoners and ultimates to force something in that mid lane. How does it start? Nap doesn't have the flash. He can't lock down Paz long enough. And Kassin also hasn't stacked up the Blooming Blows for long enough to get the move speed to really come through and start forcing the ultimate early. So he has to use that W, which is also what you want to pop that ultimate with, and just gets taken down by the Nars' huge base damage.
We can see that 5,000 gold lead just about for Sengoku Gaming. We've seen the outplay there. We saw the calculated play in mid. CJ have got 2 Dragon Statement, which is great, but they're down 3 towers in difference. And now we can see, yes, there are some options here. Double Essence Reaver, double Noon Quiver in for their AD carries in mid and bot lane for CGA. They've got a Wukong who's got a couple kills, and there's Divine Sundra. There's a Leandries on Cassin, so maybe they can find a team fight wombo combo, but exactly. We're starting to see some vision discrepancies here. We're starting to see some part completion item discrepancies here. Yes, there are first items completed by CGA, but Sengoku are getting much closer towards their seconds. Paz has already got that and is starting to find a 1v1 versus Cassin. The Lilting Lullaby comes through and will force Cassin out of the jungle, but he does survive. And double control wall in that tri-brush, probably not what you want to see if you're a CGA fan as well.
No, not the most efficient use of vision control. Paz is starting to flex their muscles, though. We saw it in the last fight, and able to force out the Lilia from that top side of the map, too. And much like Gango forcing kind of flex the muscles in this mid part of the map, right? So now CGA find themselves in this awkward situation again with like, all right, okay, we are losing side lanes. We are not finding things sticking in team. Well, I mean, the last team fight did end up winning for them, but the team fights are not presenting themselves readily enough. They've lost too much pressure towards the Dragon, and of course that might end up extending itself towards the Baron too. To really find themselves enough team fights to keep themselves even in gold, because, you know, they happen to be few and far between. They're not getting kill gold. They're falling further and further behind in gold, which means that they maybe do need to pull out another bit of savvy decision making to get themselves back into this game, as they did versus Axis.
The Dragon stacking is broken. We were talking about Paz forcing Cassin out of the jungle, which meant they couldn't be around for the Dragon spawn, and Paz, highest CS per minute for top laners, second highest CS per minute for top laners, highest GPM, third highest damage per DPM. Like, this guy's been having a great split, and it's just showing up in this kind of thing. Force the jungler out, gives Sengoku the time to get over to that Dragon, take it out, stop the stacking. And Sengoku were pretty heavily in command of this game.
No, I think that Sengoku, they have, you know, this style, which is slower than their previous style earlier in the split. We thought, oh, this team's gonna be super aggressive. We're gonna play around Crash and Ramane, who's been this this huge long player over all this time. Gango, maybe the most aggressive AD carry in the lead. That's not really been the case for the last couple of weeks, but they've found success with it, so credit to them, the coaching staff, managing to mold these players and put them onto the same part of the map. Alchemy sadly does not have the attack speeds to clear out those walls because he's a Rel.
Rel versus wards, it's just a nightmare. You attack
That's
so
the real
slowly.
matchup
It's like
here,
you basically, the last 10 seconds of your sweeper are effectively, or rather last 5 seconds, let's be completely fair, of your sweeper are so useless as well, because you just can't clear a ward.
But this is why so often in your season, when season 4 kind of hit and suddenly vision control become much more of a big thing when you had the trinket wards come in. You saw a lot of supports running around with an AD carry, running around as that duo clearing out wards, or an attack speed champion in general, just to kind of come through and say, all right, okay, we need to clear out these wards very efficiently. If you have someone coming with you when you're sweeping out vision, you can clear out, well, I mean, 2 champions, that's 2 times the amount of attacks you can put out, actually more than that if they actually build attack speed. You can clear a lot more wards.
Hear ye, Sengoku Gaming's AD carry Gango has hit 100 mists. 80 is kind of the mark where you are truly online. 100 is getting to terrifying levels, and 120 is, of course, Caitlyn levels of range as well, which is always a terror to deal with. Kraken Slayer is completed alongside, of course, the is it Spectral Sickle that it transforms into? I always forget.
Spectral Sickle is the initial item.
basic,
I actually
yeah, I
can't remember what it goes into fully upgraded.
That's exactly my problem. I can never remember the upgrade.
Man, you can see the range.
Either way, 2 items complete.
Again, this just puts the emphasis again on. So we know it's difficult for CJ because it's kind of the problem with shoot, big fight coming in. Maybe looking at it, just they're so fast. They move back and forth. It's really hard to tell in about a half-second window whether Crash is going to go in for a stun like they are now or not.
Oh, they are. Nation gets out for now. The Dawning Shadow isn't quite enough, and now Nation pulls off the culling, and Milan's heal is enough to keep him alive as well, but that forces out Nation from the fight. They're going to start. Baron, Sengoku are going to go for this. Nation at least has teleport to come back into this, and they are going to try and force the fight. Paz isn't at Meganar, though, and he's trying a 1v1 versus the AD carry. Gets half the HP bar in Milan before the fight begins. Baron down to 4,000 hit points. Here comes the teleport. Nation hops over the wall, starts trading onto Paz. Remember, still no Meganar, still not stacked. In goes Alchemy, forced a number of flashes out. He will go down, and now Sengoku look for the re-engaged Cassid, having to flash away, gets jumped on, goes down, but that is a big cyclone from the clone, still 2 dead. Paz hopping forwards, looking for the Meganar back, and CGA find themselves losing the fight. That's 3. Make that 4 members dead. Sengoku move back to Baron, and this game is well and truly Sengoku favored.
CJ far too telegraphed. Alchemy's engage is disengaged from you, spaced out, and well, Nap could make his way into the back either. Paz immediately chunks out Milan before the fight even starts, and Sengoku find themselves a Baron after a period of very controlled aggression.
Look at this replay one more time, and you can see they've started the Baron, they've burned the teleport. It's all looking good for Sengoku, and they just capitalized well here. Everyone dies.
This is fighting against a victor in a choke point. The gravity field's already down. Alchemy has to go far too deep because he burns the flash. It's almost like the Jarvan engages of yore, when you have to go flag, drag, and then flash cataclysm. No one can follow up on that. And nor can Milan end up disengaging. At the end of that fight, does have the Feather Storm, but of course the cast time on the Meganar is very quick. That ends up coming through in time for Paz to get that kill onto the AD carry, and now you're staring down the barrel of a 9,000 gold lead to the side of Sengoku, and if they weren't ahead before, now they get to push in with the Baron buff, and things are going to go from bad to worse for CGA.
There's ahead, and then there's 9,000 gold ahead. Sengoku Gaming, the full court press begins, shoving in a 1-4 setup. Mid lane and bot lane pushed in simultaneously. Naken at least manages to get the top lane shoving for CGA to buy them space over there. Sengoku stepping forwards. Meganar runs out on Paz, and both inhibitor turrets now under siege. Stepping forward goes Sengoku, looking to get the inhibitor here in bot lane, and CGA seem willing to cede it in trade for at least clearing away the mid lane wave. They've got to think about how much they give away here, Nightmare. If they give up too much, what small hope they have of winning this game starts going out of the window.
What are you waiting for now for CGA? You have 2 AD carries, sure, okay. One of those goes left unchecked, and maybe you can kill someone like Gango or Ramune. You have to get to those 2 through a Tahm Kench, through an Udyr, and through a Nah. And you're not the longest range AD carries. So I look at this from CGA and I'm like, honestly, you're waiting for mistakes from Sengoku. What can you pull across the map? Well, that's kind of hard because you're not winning a side lane, even with a Divine Sundra. Nah, maybe looking for a big engage. I just don't know if it's enough, particularly not with a 10,500 gold lead.
Ooh.
The power play is incredible from the side of Sengoku. They've just turned the screws on this team of Crest Gaming out. They're going to pick up another dragon, get themselves more ultimate cooldown reduction. Also, interesting thing about Udyr Udyr is one of the few champions of the game with a special consideration from Cloud Dragons because, of
Oh,
course,
really?
he doesn't have necessarily an ultimate cooldown. He has base stances, right?
Yes,
so what
of
happens for Udyr instead is that he has his global cooldown on how quickly he can change between stances reduced instead, which means that he just gets a few more bear stances out, a few more of everything. It's actually not
That's
a
actually
bad
pretty
dragon to pick
good.
up for the Udyr. And of course,
I'd
if you
take
get that soul, if you get 4 Cloud Dragons into a Cloud Soul, that is one of the most impactful things you can have for an Udyr. It's actually very good value.
He's already about speed. Add in more speed to your speed, and yeah, he gets pretty damn fast. Of course, Sengoku broke the dragon stacking. They're now 2 dragons apiece. They have 8 turrets to 1. They have got over 10,000 gold in the advantage, and CGA are desperately holding on, looking to scale. 2.5 items for both of their AD carries is something, but they need to stay alive. They need to try and find some kind of mirage. They've got the tools for it between Nap, Cassin, and Alchemy pulling off some flanks, but it really is going to have to be something very special.
It will have to be. You don't have enough items on the Wukong for him to be a damage threat. And we said playing Wukong from behind is difficult. Right now, look, he just walks up and you can't even threaten Udyr. Udyr just gets back into turtle stance, starts healing up. And this is controlled, slow, methodical aggression from Sengoku, scaling up on their backline carries. And CGA, what do? What have you got left in the tank?
There is Paz pulling off that aggression in the side lane. What a game this player has had. Up 60 CS, 3 items complete. Got those 2 turrets. The island that Nap was left on. Just so difficult for that guy to play around. Just isolated in a 2v1 with Crash just permanently around with the Herald. It's made this game kind of snowball from there. Despite what looked like good plays early on in the bot lane, they've got to see whether they can find a bit more of that magic. Find an engage like that. Enti caught. But, of course, the Devourer is there. Nap goes into the backline. He's found Gage and Gango trying to win in the backside. He goes golden, but the lilting lullaby is huge as well. Is this the miracle they needed? It's 2 for Cassin, and the fight is going the way of CGA from 10,000 gold down. A triple kill already for Cassin. Enti now flashes away. The Swell Seed lands as well. He's burning down. Look for the Dream Dust. And Enti at least gets to walk away, but CGA some way, somehow, find a massive engage.
And that is a fight from, well, the top draw of CGA going straight into the replay, and thank you for that, because there are far too many things to track. What happens? Well, okay, we have the group of course, the 2 backline carries in the Tom Kench up in this top side. Nap gets right into the backline. Also uses his clone very effectively to have that double knock-up, and Gango just doesn't have a second Devour. At this time, see, the problem with the last fight was that we saw kind of a disconnect between Nap and, of course, Alchemy. Not so this time. Nation, Milan get to have a very clean fight, and the triple kill from Cassin. Turns out that the AP threat of this Lilia is significant enough.
The gold lead is still very Sengoku favored. The tower lead still very Sengoku favored. Then just look over at those damage numbers. AD carries doing a lot of work for CGA. And that top, that jungle, we said, oh, they're so far behind. This Wukong is like, oh, does he really have the damage? Kind of turns out they apparently do at this point in the game.
Apparently they do. So Sengoku, they overcommit towards that top inhibitor. They don't have a way to disengage, and Alchemy and Nap finally find their rage. Cassin now with the double damage build going towards Leandrius and the demonic embrace, not going towards anything like the Moonstorm Renewal. Of course, is the only magic damage on his team, unless you're going to count the negligible amount coming out of the Rel. And maybe needs to channel a bit more of that damage though, as the Baron is going down, and CJ will want to find another fight.
Paz still a little way from Mega now, but it is starting to stack up now. Alchemy goes in again, but it's not hit that many people right now. That isn't a trap repel this by time. Paz is caught off to the side. Alchemy is dead, but look at Nap into the backline. Another big knockup. Yes, you've dealt with the Rel, but the engage following the engage into the lilting lullaby. Not again. Surely not again. It's close already. Milan folds the feathers back, and look at Nation on the other side. The 80 carries have been left untouched, and they get the ace.
Sengoku just cannot find the front to back that they need. Paz forced out from several team fights. This player who you said had this high damage share has been a stalwart in the top lane for this blue team of Sengoku. Just cannot get into the Nation. Just zones them out and gets into the backline once again. What does this mean? They get the Baron. They get themselves control back of the game. How did it happen? Alchemy starts the things off well, and it buys another angle of entry for Nap, who gets in again with the double knockup. Gets right onto the backline, and at the end of the day, Sengoku only still have 1 Devour to use. Paz is here. Sure, he's got himself the Flash, he's got himself the Meganar, but he's not in range to really threaten Milan and Kassin. They've managed to keep getting their damage procs down. Look at that, a triple W from Kassin. It buys enough time for Nathan to come back in. The backline is already dead by that point. Milan may struggle in the laning phase, and many of these games comes out in these team fights alongside Nation and Kassin. That's more than enough, it seems, to take down Sengoku, even with that hefty gold lead.
And even in this game, the guy got 2 kills, and he's having a great one. You can see the damage. Like, Senna's putting out damage. The problem is, it's being matched. It's being beaten by Nation, by Kassin, and Milan and Napa no slouches either. And suddenly, this gold lead is back to only 2,000 apart. They are at soul point, and Sengoku Gaming are suddenly struggling to win these team fights. The items have come through, and you've said it before. There is only one Devour. Alchemy goes in first, forces the Devour. Nap goes in afterwards, after the flashes are blown, and there's no more ways out.
The Chaos Storm?
The Chaos Storm is big, and that might be making me eat my words. Crash now in trouble. Look at the turnaround, though! They force engage, and this time Nap punishes them again. Milan punishes them again. Alchemy storming forwards. The Crash down with the mount up, and that will be Milan getting another one. It's a double for him, and suddenly it's another big team fight victory, and the towers are now under siege with Baron in the hands of CGA.
Losing a team fight against Baron is worst case scenario for Sengoku. Paz once more cannot perform as the front line. Crash certainly can't, gets culled out of existence. And CGA running it down to the Nexus Source. This could be the game from an 11,000 gold deficit.
And we asked for miracle engages for CGA to win this game. Alchemy, Nap, take your damn hats, turn around.
Huge turnaround from CGA. Where did it come from? Ensemble performance, of course. Nap on the Wukong. That, on his Renekton, on a number of other key picks. He can have some of those disruptive late game team fights. This was more than disruptive. This was destructive from the Wukong player for CGA.
One of the biggest comebacks we have ever witnessed here in the LJL. Hell, that's got to be up there in the rankings for Global League, frankly. 10,500 gold at some point for Sengoku Gaming. 2 inhibitors. They were on to Nexus Towers. And yet CGA find the turnaround engages time after time after time to find themselves the victory. It's another turnaround victory for them. 2 games in a row. To break it down, well, just have to wait for the analyst desk after this break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Desk. Moss One initialized Nightmare. Gentlemen, don't call it a comeback, call it a throw, or is it the comeback kings of Crest Gaming Act? Gentlemen, what a game to just witness. That was a
Man
roller
alive.
coaster.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I think that's got to be that's the accurate word because Sengoku were so in this game, like catastrophically far ahead in the game. I think what was it, 10,500 gold at this max point? Like
Yeah.
they had 2 inhibitors, they were onto Nexus turrets. One Nexus turret was like what 10 HP away from falling. Like that game was a sure thing, right?
Oh, I thought it was Nightmare. What? How was
I
it not?
Well, I mean, I was also in that boat saying, all right, okay, huge gold lead. How do you ever close the distance with this backline? How do you go front to back versus a Victor and a Senna when you've got short range AD carries like your Zyre and your Lucian? Turns out having a nap on his Wukong certainly helps. Alchemy once again coming out big in the late game. These two, CJ of last year, one of the things that we kind of smacked them about and said, get better at the early game. Don't give up early laning leads. Don't do this. But if they ever made it to late game, I mean, the two returning members of this team in Nap and Alchemy knew how to play those late game fights, and
Yeah,
turns
big
out
time.
they did today too.
I mean, let's go back a little bit into the beginning to the midpoint of this game. It was all mostly Sengoku finding gold leads, even when Crest Gaming Act were finding things around the objectives. They were always trading kills. This game was pretty competitive for the first 15-20 minutes, outside of if you stopped looking at the gold graph, just slowly going further and further, like Gam stock, like everywhere else. It's been a wild thing to watch.
Yeah, I think you could kind of see CJ said, okay, we want to stack dragons. And they went for that trade, which is fine. But again, we've had this question about, okay, so what are you giving up in opportunity cost? It often comes
Right?
with first turret, but that was a little bit more than first turret because you saw Crash get the Herald. There were 2+ control wards in the red side jungle that kept Kassin from ever coming up to get into his red side jungle for a long period of time. 2 turrets went down on the top side, big CS lead for Paz. Half your jungle's gone for Cassin. It's like, okay, so actually what you've really given up is half your jungle, 2 turrets, and Nat being forced to play back by his inhibitor turret because he just can't come into contest the wave in a 2 versus 1 with no way for his team to come and help because of the vision control. That's a lot more than just 1 dragon for 1 turret.
And moving on throughout the game, it's just more of that, right? Sengoku were always just a step ahead. And I think a great point that brings us in, Nightmare, is Sengoku prepping for Baron. They wait for CGA to come into them, and then they collapse on top of them, and Sengoku get the Baron. It was like, oh, well, this is just beautiful to watch. It's poetry in motion, as Jim would probably say.
As we saw in an earlier team fight, CJ could succeed if things were split, omnidirectional. Wukong shutting down the carries, Nation trying to battle someone a 1v1 and this strong Lucian. I mean, it kind of like Milan's left a little bit out to dry on the Zyre on that front because they kind of want to play front to back in the other ways. Who else wants to fight front to back? Well, most of Sangoku's team comp, right? They've got the Tom Kench who's happy to be bulwark and then just devour either the Senna or the Victor who gets into trouble. Victor flashes out of this engage from Alchemy, who then just kind of just gets absolutely slaughtered, and then the rest of the team gets slaughtered right behind them. Sangoku formed that choke point defense, and they just capitalized on it.
Yeah, and this felt hugely controlled by Sengoku. As we've already mentioned, initialized, they got those towers in Crest Gaming X base. They got the inhibitors. They were moving on for a death march, and this felt, and to quote Nightmare, this is slow, this is calculated, this is controlled by Sengoku. And until we hit the 29-minute mark, we won't hit there. Before 29 minutes, this game was all Sengoku, right?
Yeah, it was, and it felt like
There's
the
like one
plays
team
that
fight,
CGA
right?
tried to make didn't work out. Like, remember that 1v3 in the top side for Paz, where Paz just goes, yeah, I'll take this, gets the 1-for-1, and in the meanwhile, the mid lane, CGA on their kind of proactive play, get the tower, get kills. So in the end, they go, what, 3-for-1 plus towers, and they've got Baron as well, and it's all going really well. The right carries are getting the gold. Ramane's got what he needed to get up to all his damage items. Gango's got all the souls in the world. It looks completely peaches and cream, and then it just starts falling apart.
Yeah, and actually, let's continue on with this point and initialize. I'll come Nightmare for the second team fight. The first team fight that happens, this was really all Nap and Alchemy kind of finding a way into the backline, allowing Kassin to come in on that Lilia rather safely, and it was just combo wombo nation initialize. You had a whale of a time casting that.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was literally the moment I say CGA need to find some miracle engages to come back into this game, and Nightmare is saying, "Well, I'm just not sure about the Wukong having the damage." We're both kind of like made to go, maybe
Hmm.
he was having this conversation about does Nap have what it takes to come into this, and then Rel goes in, they devour, they spit out, and then Nop follows up. They've made this decision finally later on to go in a little bit disconnected. And that basically allows Nap to clone further in, get onto Gango, get onto Ramane, prevent the Victor and the Senna from just standing and firing. Yes, they get to stand a long way back, but when you can go miles on these engaged champions, you can do it. And it's also meant that it was kind of leaving Milan and Nation free to fire as they will, because everyone was so distracted by the Rel and the Wukong, and to an extent the Lilia as well, who found some really big lilting lullabies partway through these fights as well. Just finally, CGA started managing to layer their CC enough that the one Devour just wasn't enough. We said it time and time again.
Yeah, the Kassin ending up getting a triple kill in that first engage, and it was like, okay, maybe there's a way in, but I wasn't convinced that there was actually a chance for Crest Gaming Act till this second fight, Nightmare, all around the not dragon, Baron Pit, where we end up seeing an ace, but not the way I thought, and not the team I thought that was going to get aced.
No, and at this point, we started kind of getting keyed into what was kind of going wrong with Sengoku in these fights. First off, there's only one Devour from Tahm Kench. So that means you can either choose to bail out someone from one instance of damage or one period of that team fight. That also means they're not doing the damage themselves. And what that means is that if you get Senna and you get Victor caught at the same time, things go very bad. And that's exactly what Nap was doing in multiple team fights. The other thing is that if Meganar is not stood in front of the team, they struggle to play front to back. The Tahm Kench is not enough of a front line because Tahm Kench has to be stood right next to his carries. He can't be separated from them and let his Senna get one shot. He needs to be there for the instant devour. So what happened when Nation zoned out Paz was, well, okay, actually in the 4v4, the damage coming out from Lilia and of course the double AD, the other AD carry coming out of the Xayah was enough to actually turn things around with Nap doing the damage. Paz didn't really have much of an impact, and Nation rejoins the fight. That ends up leading to the ace, and that's really what the story of that team fight was.
Yeah. See, we could talk over the next one or two more fights, but it's just more and more in the repeat because there's only really two real fights that happen. One was a very small skirmish where I think one member gets caught out from Sengoku, and then they get the full ace. And then they get a full ace again on Sengoku do Crest Gaming Act. By that point, they already had the Baron. They were running over the game, and Sengoku looked rather perplexed and lost. You could almost tell it with how just the characters were moving on them on the map. It was like, ooh, Sengoku don't know what they're doing. Crest Gaming Act. Well, this is now the interesting point, gentlemen. Was it Sengoku's throw, or was it the comeback of the century in the LJL? I'm going to say comeback.
It's a bit of both.
Look, yeah, I kind of agree. I think part of it is like, Nightmare is right. Paz was not quite in the right position. He was looking for flanks when he needed to be playing frontline. Especially because that's what had been working earlier in the game. And they had Snowball, right? And it felt pretty good. The problem was that it hit a point where it got late enough, and that is part of the deal with if you are going to play it slow, you do let your opposing team scale. That everybody on the other team did get their items. Cassin and Nap got enough items to be threatening, and then Nation and Milan on those AD carries, you leave them long enough, they're always going to have some damage. Yes, I think Nap. Oh, sorry, no, not Nap. Paz wasn't there to play frontline, which is a bit frustrating. But on the other side, Nap, Alchemy, Cassin, those late game miracle engages time and time again were so nice. Like, you got to give credit for catching the throw or making the throw possible. Like, if you go for a hard enough tackle, you can make people drop the ball.
It reminds me a little bit of the Axis Rascal Jester game where we were similarly saying, okay, well, about recap Soriana in terms of him having some really good ultimates at the start of the game, and then late game fights is like, oh, this is just not good. He's sombreroing, he's missing everything, right? It was a game of two halves. In this game, it was more about, okay, the early fights actually, Paz was doing well in the early game. He had a
was.
1-for-1 in that 1v3. He had some great Mega Gnar ults in killing Milan and chunking him out before team fights. And then we had about 3 fights back to back, the 3 that they lost, where Paz was just not impacting the game. I think that Sengoku, the reason they lost was in the late game they couldn't play around a Mega Gnar. That's what I would actually say. It takes a skilled engage and a skilled team fight from CGA to capitalize on that, but the opening at the end of the day was shown by Sengoku.
Should have listened to Captain Flowers and just played Skarner. Then you just can't mess up a team
Skarner
fight
top
like that.
lane, that's what we do.
I mean.
Oh, remember when Afroman did that?
Oh boy,
I
I
mean,
forgot that was a thing. Oh, I was joking and it's actually happened. Okay.
It's like I'm privy to what goes on in this league. Crazy things, gentlemen, crazy things. But with this game being over and in the books, we'll talk about it far more on our podcast, I'm sure, as we'll have to review this one each individually, separately, so we don't all get to the same thought process and we actually can have a conversation and we don't all just agree with one another, as does sometimes happen because we're all so smart and handsome. We all just going to go, yes, absolutely. But ladies and gentlemen out there, I will stop rabbiting on and I will actually cut us to a break here. So when we come back from this break, we'll find out who will be the victor of the rematch of Axis versus Rascal Jester. Don't go anywhere.